Now onto more serious stuff. So direction, did you feel like you're the only one that saw what you were seeing, or did you...
I would give a talk, everybody was convinced. So I think, okay, now my job is done. Now, and with these breakthroughs, I think what is needed is that you don't listen to the customer.
That problem is, the dilemma is, how do you balance standing on the shoulder of giants and innovating?
And also, before you come up with a solution, think about ways of how you are going to evaluate it.
Yeah, tell me if you like it. How similar do you see the jobs of a founder and being a professor?
Professor, I think the joy of being a professor is like it's clear that in the US there is a more of a... So I married the right wife, right? So I'm here in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning.
My question is, do you feel like researchers capture enough of the economic value they create?
As I said, try to do something original in your life.
Okay.
Right?
Professor, I've seen so many interviews of you, but none of which focused on the bigger picture, I think. And you have so much knowledge that can benefit all of our fellow youngsters, which is why I decided to do this with you. So the thing that most people know about you is that you're mainly a researcher, a chief scientist, but what most people don't know is that you're a poet. I've read your poem.
Am I a poet?
Yes, I've read your poem about Ursel, and referring to that poet, I'd like to ask you the first question. What processes do people follow in Ursel? Perhaps drinking processes.
So the Ursel is like the village where I was born, right? Yeah. And the village is known for the contente mens. Yeah. So the contente mens is like a fictional personality of somebody that is very happy with how life is going. Yeah. So he takes time to eat, takes time to drink, and is very, very happy about that, right? So I think that's the philosophy of the area where I come, to be like relaxed and enjoy life.
Yeah, I feel like you're always in a good mood from the times I've seen you, even in the lectures when you're busy. Okay, but now onto more serious stuff. So I told you I want to zoom out a bit, and so most of your interviews were specifically about process mining, but not many go into the history. So to help our fellow students know what it feels like to have such a big impact and to invent a new field, I'd like to ask you what it felt like back then to invent process mining. Because I imagine it wasn't as popular as now, especially with the dot-com bubble going on at the same time. You were going in that direction, everyone was going in the internet direction.
Yeah, so many people often ask that question, and when I look at how process mining started to come into existence, was my frustration with workflow management technology, right? Because I expected a lot of that. I expected that organizations would start by modeling their processes and then building information systems accordingly. And soon I realized, this is not very realistic, right? So I saw many companies that were buying workflow management technology and then try to implement it, often spending lots of money and time on both software and the modeling process. And in the end, these systems would not go into production.
Okay, but how did you get to see that? Did you have contact to customers that you saw these problems?
So, like at that point in time, I was doing, let's say, research at university. I was a professor there, but I was also like a part-time consultant for a company called Bacchinist, that is now part of Deloitte. And that was just half a day per week appointment. And by doing that, we had like a workflow technology group within Bacchinist, which was very strong. Okay. So we were, let's say, helping many customers to select workflow management technology and then later implement it. So that is how I got this experience. So we had a longer running project where we would actually use simulation to try to predict what the effect of the introduction of a workflow management system would be. So you're very excited about predicting how good it would be, but what we found out in the end is that many of the organizations that bought the technology actually did not put it into production. Oh, really? Which made me think, this is not good, right? People are investing money in this, and then they get very disappointed. And then I got very intrigued by, okay, if this is not working, if people cannot be trusted to say how processes run, can we actually, let's say, simply use the data that is out there and then try to reconstruct this? And that is how this all started. And you asked me, like, did I envision that this would be big? I kind of, right from the start, I thought this is the only logical way.
Really?
I'm a bit astonished that it has taken such a long time, and that still, like many organizations, are not aware of this, right? It's
but it felt contrarian at that point, when it felt like you were going in a different direction. Did you feel like you're the only one that saw what you were seeing, or did you feel like everyone is also like agreeing with you?
Like I feel that nobody saw it at that point in time, and I'm still very surprised by that. I still remember also, for example, giving keynotes at a large Gartner BPM conference. And these were moments in my life where I thought I would give a talk. Everybody was convinced. So I think, okay, now my job is done. Now people know this is the way to go forward. And then, despite people being super enthusiastic and super excited, they would go back to their offices and continue what they were always doing. And I think one of the key elements is, of course, that many organizations very much try to listen to what the customer says.
Yes.
Right? And with these breakthroughs, I think what is needed is that you don't listen to the customer.
That's one of my questions. I feel like it's a very important question. Should you do your research? This is also for you. Do you do your research, like basic research, starting with the technology, or do you do your research starting with customer demand or customer problems? So industry-led research versus like basic research.
I think it's a mix, right?
So,
so in essence, like, it's basic research. You work on things that are interesting. And so why was I so super enthusiastic about the idea of process mining? I had been working for many years on Petri nets.
Yeah.
And there was this idea, okay, can we now automatically discover a Petri net?
Yeah.
Right? Which was a question that nobody thought about before.
Okay.
And at first, perhaps for many people, it was not so obvious what the practical relevance would be, but it was a super interesting scientific challenge. So I think that is one side. On the other side, it is also clear that if you're working on difficult problems, that at some point in time you need to think enough is enough, right? You can go very long in a certain direction, but it becomes more and more difficult to get additional results. And then I think you only want to continue in a particular direction if you also have the feeling, okay, in the end people will benefit from this in some way.
So do you today still like research focus on technology now after the field has emerged, or does all of your research now start with the customer problems, with the feedback loop from Celonis, what they tell you, what the customers
So there I would also say that there is a mix, right? If I work just by myself, like in the weekend, I still enjoy looking more at very formal technical problems to keep me young. I have too less time to work on that. So I still think that there are very foundational, so for example, if you look at free choice Petri nets, which is a particular class of process models, I still believe that there are, let's say, very sophisticated technical breakthroughs possible that in the end will lead to a major change in the process mining field.
Like object-centric process mining?
But it is not so clear, right? So today you can use process mining tools and you push a button and you see a process model and it looks all very easy. But I would argue that the process models that we are discovering today are not good enough yet, right?
Really?
They work, it's very applicable, organizations can use it, but we have not, let's say, reached some, let's say, optimum state.
So like the accuracy or the, let's say, accuracy for the non-technical viewers, the accuracy of the process model is still not where it should be, you're saying?
I still think that there are improvements possible. What we see if we do practical projects, we see that if people model processes by hand, using the data, they can still get better models than a fully automatic algorithm. Right?
I'm surprised.
which of course, if people would start without any tools, they would not get a good model.
Yeah.
But like I would say at this point in time, the optimal models you get in a hybrid situation where you are combining, let's say, domain knowledge with the data. And I think we can go further where we actually still discover better process models. Yeah.
Staying on that topic of research and discovery, this is one of the biggest personal problems I'm facing right now. I don't know if other people face the same problem. I think you face the same problem. But the problem is, the dilemma is, how do you balance standing on the shoulder of giants and innovating? Let me explain. So the dilemma is, let's say, for example, you're trying to invent a new discovery algorithm. So what you could do is look at the existing, let's say we're inventing the fuzzy miner. We're the people who invented fuzzy miner. If you go look at the alpha miner, heuristic miner, and all the existing solutions, you anchor your brain in that area. You start thinking that way. And if you don't look at them at all, you start with a fresh idea. I feel like from what I remember, the fuzzy miner is like a fresh idea, completely different than the ones before. So how do you benefit from the existing research, from the existing knowledge, while also innovating and coming up with new solutions? It's one of the biggest problems I personally have. Like even in the startup world, do I go let's say, for example, I'm trying to compete with Celonis and Signavio. Do I go look at what their solution looks like, or do I personally start with the customer's problem and build the solution from first principles?
Yeah, so I think again, you need to do both, right? The big risk if you don't look at existing work is that you are reinventing things that have been reinventing before, right? And there, for example, if I look in the process space, for me it is very beneficial to have worked in the area of PetriNet for a very long time. Yeah. I can quickly recognize if things are very similar to things that have people been thinking about 20 years ago or something like that. So on the one hand, it is beneficial to look at existing things and to have a deep knowledge of that. At the same time, you want to look at original solutions and original let's say problems. If you look at original solutions, what I think typically helps, if you have a certain problem, to try to look at what people are doing and try to think, okay, can we now look at it from a completely different angle?
That's very hard to do. How do you do that?
Typical also looking at other fields of research where you may learn something like that. So just yesterday I was giving a lecture on Shapley values,
yes,
like there are ideas that are coming from game theory that are in the end applied in machine learning, right? So I think sometimes there are these types of crossovers. So I think that is one, let's say, hint that I can give. I think another thing that you often see is that it is very difficult. I'm now talking more about science, but I think it also applies to if you're starting a new business. It is very difficult to sell something completely new. And
yes.
That is when you have a company and you have a completely new product that did not exist before, then it is difficult to sell because people do not understand what you're selling. In research, you see something similar. Right, so if we come up with a completely new problem that nobody has worked on before, then reviewers are typically very critical because they ask you, yeah, it's very nice that you're doing this, but how do you now evaluate what you're doing? How are you comparing to others? And if you're working on a new problem, you cannot do that, right? So I think there is a difficulty in starting something new, and people doing a startup, I think, exactly have this feeling. At the same time, one should also realize, and there I think industry is exactly the same as research, if you are doing something that is an incremental improvement of something that already 1,000 people worked on before, you know that the impact will be very limited, right? Yeah. So you need to force yourself to be out of this comfort zone.
It's like a risk-reward ratio.
What I think is very interesting is that if you see how scientists work, researchers, and how industry work is in a way similar.
Yeah,
right?
so that was my next question.
So you're trying to look at this Pareto optimal point where you're doing stuff that is not, let's say, too foreign that you can not sell it at all, right?
Yeah.
That it is so strange and so...
I mean, you had to do that. You had to do that in the beginning. And Celonis had to do that.
Yeah.
They were forced to like start from zero, or not so, maybe the first post mining vendor. They had to sell an industry that didn't exist yet.
And if you talk to the founders, so of course there were, let's say, smaller startups before, but the Slowness was the first, let's say, company to really sell a process mining at a large scale. Yeah. But if you hear the stories of the founders on how they started, where they are basically talking to many people, finding it very difficult to convince organizations to use this technology. That is difficult, but at the same time, if you succeed, then you have this advantage that you're quite unique, right? And often, in hindsight, things look very simple. Yeah. But if you're there in the moment in time itself, it is not so simple. Right?
For me, it's right now I'm also doing something in the field of process mining, but it's so much easier for me. It's like the solution has been proven. Celonis has done it. So many people have done it before. If I were in their position a few years ago, it would have been way harder. Yeah. But back to the innovation thing. If we were to discuss this more tactically, like imagine I'm trying to invent a new process discovery algorithm. How should I go about inventing a new algorithm? My current solution for that is to try to invent my own solution first, and after I've invented my own solution, I go look at the existing ones. How would you go about it?
I would choose more of a mixed, right? I would study more like what is already available there, and at the same time try to think, okay, can I now come up with a completely original angle? I think in many cases it's also the solution is not the challenge. I think in many cases the question is the challenge.
Questions,
right?
The challenge.
So thinking about what are the right interesting questions that you can try to give an answer to.
Yeah.
What I think is also that's more like a declarative way of thinking. If you think about so many people try to immediately think about a solution, right?
Yeah.
I do this and this and this, and then it works. But I think it's very helpful to think about, okay, what is the question, and to have that clear. And also, before you come up with the solution, think about ways of how you are going to evaluate it.
Okay, so we established first that process discovery is something that's worth working on, and then we go send the people off working on it.
And then you need to also think about, like, okay, if I now say process discovery is something that I want to have, then you need to think, before you come up with an implementation, you need to think, okay, when is the discovered process model or the conformance checking diagnostics that you have, when do you consider that to be valuable?
Yeah.
And then you try to look at, okay, can I now do this efficiently, right?
Yeah.
And can I evaluate it with respect to the benchmarks that I have before?
Okay, understand. And now something more personal. So you said, tell me if you like it. It's a bit lighter.
I'm a coffee drinker, right? So that's.
But it tastes different, right?
I think I prefer the Italian style coffee.
Yeah, it's very light.
I hope I don't insult you.
No, it's okay. So what I want to ask you is, how do you see? So I have a quote from you from your website.
Yeah.
Working as an academic and having the freedom to pick your own research challenges is the best job I can imagine. You said.
Yeah.
And I'd say that about being a founder. So what I want to ask you, or being a CEO, so how similar do you see the jobs of a founder and being a professor? I don't know exactly what you do as a professor now, but what I imagine what your main role is steering the ship of the whole process mining industry.
Oh.
And it's not about you innovating personally, it's about you picking the right direction to work in. For example, picking that object-centric process mining is something worthy working on. So what's your role now as a professor, and how would it compare to the role of a founder or a CEO?
Yeah, so my job as a professor, of course, I have many, let's say, PhDs, let's say, working in the group, right? And I'm also doing teaching. So basically, a large part of the week is filled with, let's say, duties that one has to do, right?
Okay.
So I like to teach. Yeah. But this is also consuming quite some time. I have, I don't know, per year we have perhaps almost 100 bachelor and thesis students giving a final presentation. So you can imagine that is generating a lot of, let's say, things that you simply have to do. at the same time, you are in contact with many, let's say, different young people, and that is also giving energy, right? That you see new and original ideas. So my goal as a professor is, let's say, to kind of guide people in the directions that you want to do, and at the same time remain fit myself by actually studying things in detail. And
do you still do that? Do you still dive deep into?
I dive deep in certain things, but of course there I have certain preferences. There are things that I don't find that I think people these days would consider to be black boxes that one is using. Yeah. I try to focus on things that are technical and elegant. But to come back to your original question, like comparing a founder to a professor, I think the joy of being a professor is that you are in control of what you are doing, right? So specifically here in Germany, I think Germany, there is freedom of research and teaching. So I decide what I'm researching. Yeah. I decide what I'm teaching. And like that's a kind of freedom that you would never find in a large organization.
But I would have guessed the opposite, because as a professor, maybe you have to ensure that the government grants or the taxpayers' money is being put to something to use. But as a founder, you're responsible for the money, so you're paying yourself. If you decide to do something that everyone thinks is crazy, you're gonna lose your own money. But I would have thought that as a professor, maybe people start troubling you because they're saying, "Why are you working on process mining?"
No, let me rephrase it differently, and I think that then you understand what I mean. If you are a professor and you're working on certain things, okay, and you're moving from one university to another university, yeah, you basically take everything with you that you have ever worked on, yeah, right? So when I was moving from Eindhoven here to Aachen, like for many years I was a professor in Eindhoven, very good university, yeah, and I moved to Aachen, and I felt that I owned everything I worked on my entire life, right? So you have a kind of ownership, yeah, about the things that you have created. If you would think of somebody working in a company, yeah, and you would move from, I don't know, from a car manufacturer to a company that is creating refrigerators, yeah, you're not taking much with you. You're taking with you your experiences, but it's not that, okay, I take the cars that I have developed, etc., etc. And I think this makes the work at universities very personal, right? So that what you create is really yours, right? It's your intellectual property, and people can say whatever they want, you take it with you. And I think this is very unique if you compare it to, let's say, larger organizations. And of course, if you have a startup, you have a similar kind of ownership, right? Yeah. It's your thing.
Yeah.
Of course, if you sell your company, you can be very proud of what you have realized, but at the same time, you are also losing it, right? Yeah. Because somebody else is now owner of the things that you worked on before.
Yeah, you can't sell your process mining IP now. It's yours forever. Yeah. Okay, now switching topics a bit. It's a sensitive topic, but yesterday I was listening to a podcast by Alexander Rinke, the founder of Solonis, a new podcast. And like always, they talked about Europe versus US. And then the interviewer asked him, why do you think there are so many huge startups in the US versus Europe? And Alex's answer was that there's so much more risk capital. There's so much more people willing to risk their money in the US versus Europe. So I want to ask you, how do you see innovation and entrepreneurship in Europe versus US? You're maybe one of the, I don't want to say a few, but you're one of the groups in Europe or one of the groups in the world that's leading as a European group versus other international groups.
Yes, so I think there are the different levels. Like it's clear that in the US, there is more of an entrepreneurial spirit that is kind of missing here in Europe in general, also in Germany. But I think Germany is not different from France, Italy, the Netherlands, etc. So I think in the US there is more of an entrepreneurial spirit. Also, if you look at the universities, I think their professors are encouraged more to start their own businesses and stuff like that, right? So for a US professor, it's quite normal to have a professorship, which corresponds to 9 months of work, and there are 3 months in the year that you basically use to work for companies, etc., etc. Yeah. So I think there are systematic things different in the US than here, which lead to, let's say, more, let's say, companies.
Do you think that needs to be changed?
I think that needs to be changed. At the same time, we should also realize that if we look at, let's say, process thinking, it's very clear that Europe is much stronger in this than the US, right? So I would not encourage, right, if you look at a different system, you always have to realize you need to look at the good things and the bad things and try to sort this out. I think in the US there is also, I think we also sometimes have a misconception of the US. There are a lot of crappy universities in the US. Yeah. Right? From Europe we always look at the US as like great, Stanford, MIT, etc., and like in the process space, they do not play a role at all.
Even the big ones?
The big ones do not play a role at all.
Wow.
At the same time, they are very strong universities. What people do not realize is that there are lots of incredible, crappy universities all around the US that are much worse than, let's say, the universities that are here in Germany. So that's what we should always think about carefully, like if we compare things. So for example, if you look at some of the US universities, the number of students per professor is much lower than it is here in Germany. So we should always, let's say, compare things carefully. For sure, I think that here in Europe and in Germany, we should change things, right? And it's not one thing, it's like a whole collection of things. I think we are way too bureaucratic. I think we are always very risk aversive, right? We are many things that the European Union is creating one market. I think this is something very positive, and the fact that we can go from one country to the other country without a passport, etc. I think this is great. At the same time, it is also used to enforce lots of laws like GDPR, the AI Act, etc., which are very bureaucratic approaches to try to address a problem. So at the systematic level, I think there are many improvements possible. At the same time, sometimes people say, yeah, it's really like a cultural thing, and I do not buy that, right? Also, if you compare the quality of our educational system with, for example, the US, and you look at like the normal average level, I would claim it is much higher than in the US.
Yeah,
right.
I'm hoping this and you maybe inspire our fellow students here to be more entrepreneurial and maybe spread the word even more about process mining or any other field. Yeah. One of the reasons I'm doing this.
Yeah, very good.
Okay, now a completely different thing. How do you balance being a godfather of one field and a father of four?
So I married the right wife. Perhaps that's perhaps the short answer. So of course my life is very busy. So there is no. Sometimes people ask what is the secret or something like that. There is no secret. I think it is just working very systematic and very hard. I think my advice to young people would be try to find a rhythm in your life where you can be, let's say, very productive. But perhaps I'm getting too old, but I think many people care very much about the work-life balance, and at the same time have very high expectations. And what they don't see is that people that are successful simply need to put many hours and a lot of energy in it. There is no secret thing. And if you look at somebody creating a startup, people that would create a startup and talk about work-life balance, etc., they are not going to be successful, right? You need to have like 100% commitment of doing something like that. I think that's very important. As I said, we have 4 children. When I'm at home, I'm really at home, right?
Until an annoying student sends you an email.
I try to get out, etc., etc. So I think it's very important to find mechanisms in your life that also allow you to relax. For me, I'm not a city person, I'm more of a nature person, so if I'm walking in the forest, I'm happy. But realize that if you want to be successful, you need to put the energy in it.
Okay, that's a great message. Okay, on that topic of productivity, what's your wake to sleep process like? I mean, like, what's your productivity like? I know, like, from my opinion, it seems silly to like care about these tiny details, but I noticed like the people I know, they care very much about like when do you wake up, how are you productive, how do you focus, how do you kill distractions. I know you have a holiday home, right, where you go and write in peace. Like, what's your productivity like?
Yeah, so like unfortunately the holiday house we sold.
Oh no!
It was probably a mistake. That was when we moved from Eindhoven to Aachen, right? We had this house in the Eifel, and we sold it because it was now too close, right? I think it was a bad idea. We should buy a new one. But if you look at my day, like I try to get up very early, right? So I'm here in the office at 7 o'clock in the morning. Most of the people come, let's say, more towards 9 in the office. And these are, let's say, 2 hours that you kind of get where you can be extremely productive because few people are around and you don't have any meetings yet, etc. So I think it's like having this type of discipline kind of helps. And I think it works better to do that, let's say, every day very systematically. I also know people that have other patterns that, okay, they have a deadline and then they suddenly start working, let's say, all night or something like that. I think that is not very productive in the end, right?
You know, from the outside, when we look at you, Professor, it looks like you're doing magic. You have. I looked at your LinkedIn again yesterday. You have like 10 positions at the same time. You're like a chief scientist, researcher, and a board director of many groups. But when we come to ask you how you do it, and you tell us you work very hard and you're very disciplined and you're the first one to come here, it seems a bit less like magic. Still very impressive, but from the outside it looks like magic until you look at the inside, which is why I'm asking these questions. Yeah. Okay.
Unfortunately, there is no secret there.
No secret? No secret sauce? Okay. You know how many process mining companies have been started now? I don't know, 30 maybe, process mining vendors?
It depends a bit how you count. Like I think my estimate would be that currently there are around 50 vendors that have implemented process mining in some way. But like these may be things that are working in a niche that have it like an extra extension to, let's say, companies like Celonis that only do that.
Okay.
Right?
How much economic value do you think this has resulted? I think at least multiple $1 billion. At least the valuation of the companies plus all the money people saved using process mining. Yeah, it's a huge amount. How much do you think?
I do not want to put a number on that, but the potential is still way larger.
Okay, good to hear.
Right, and for example, I think if you look at the things that people are talking about today, like ChatGPT, generative AI, etc., people are realizing that AI is making a lot of things possible.
Yeah.
But I feel it's often very much like a gimmick, right? Okay, now I can produce text, right? Very nice. Now I can create, let's say, fake videos or something like that. These are the aspects which are very, let's say, attractive to think about and to talk about and to look at, and people are very excited about it. But at the same time, there is this other reality of organizations like this university, the municipality of Aachen, the German government, where there are, let's say, millions of people working in an extremely unproductive way. Right? And if you think about that like what process mining has realized now, it's like a tiny fraction, right? If you look at the city of Aachen, there are thousands of people working in administrative jobs, still moving paper, still asking customers to fill out paper
It's
forms,
awful.
or making these paper forms digital, and then it often gets worse, right?
Yeah, I think it has to be measured in economic value. But why I want to ask you this question is not to pin you on a number. What I want to ask you is, you've created so much economic value now, and I don't know how many billions you captured of it, but my question is, do you feel like researchers capture enough of the economic value they create, or should they not even aspire to capture that economic value that they
I think
create?
they should not aspire to capture that economic value. Also, like I try to, as of course I'm now the chief scientist of Celonis, but when I started, I deliberately, many of my students started companies, and I deliberately was not part of these things. I think there should be a very clear separation between what I don't know, the government is paying, what the taxpayer is paying, and what flows into a university, right? And I think, like I don't like professors that are very, let's say, greedy, that optimize, let's say, their own income. Of course, people can be successful, and if they are entrepreneurial, they deserve to let's say, get that money. At the same time, we should realize that, I don't know, professors and other people doing a PhD, they are typically paid by taxpayer money, right? So what I'm developing as a professor is not just for Celonis or one of the others, it is for anybody to use, right? And then the organizations that are able to use this, they are, let's say, much more effective.
But don't you think the incentives are higher if people capture the value they create? So if we look at OpenAI, it's like one of the few examples of research groups that actually captures the economic value of what they're doing. Maybe it's an exception, but I don't know, don't you think the incentives are greater?
I think it is, like I think it becomes very dangerous if professors, I don't know, get too much driven by the economic value, right? And as I said, like if you look at the US model, right, there are basically 9 months per year that you're working for the university, and everything that you develop using these nine months is for everybody to use, right? It's open source, open access. There should be no limitations, and then there may be things that you're doing within the context of a specific startup or something like that, perhaps using these ideas. But I think it becomes unethical if, as a professor, you're, let's say, researching things in your, let's say, university time that you would not put in the open, and that you would kind of reroute to your own company. Right?
I feel like that's it's like very dangerous. Like you could easily slip that way.
I think it's very dangerous. I think there should be a very clear separation between, let's say, money for research and like what you're doing in the entrepreneurial spirit. And that's why I think you typically need to have other people to drive this, right? So you need to
entrepreneurs and researchers separated?
Like young students that make the decision, okay, I'm not going to do research, I want to be entrepreneurial, and then pick up these ideas that, for example, they got during a PhD or something like that, and then go and create companies. I think that is the right model.
Okay, on that topic, when I finished my bachelor's thesis, I remember I told you I want to go the entrepreneurial route, and you suggested I do a master's.
Yeah.
So when we're trying to help now the youngster make the decision if they should do a master's or PhD, if their goal is to have the biggest, greatest impact on the world, when should they? How should we guide them to make that choice? If it were your own son, maybe, like how would you guide them to make that choice?
So you should always realize that, like in the things that you do, there is a drift in a particular direction, right? And I think the first drift is that if you're in a university setting, right, you're open to, let's say, absorb, let's say, new knowledge, and you're not used to a certain lifestyle where you have money and have other stuff. I think people should realize that if they, also my advice to you would be, do your master, because if you don't do it now, you will never do it, right? So like you can decide not to do it, but you should never think, okay, I now don't do it, I do something else, and in the future I'm going to do that. And I think if you look at doing a PhD, there is something similar, right? So people after their studies, they have the choice to, let's say, to continue doing a PhD or not. At that point in time, they have to make the decision, am I going to do it or not? And I don't like people say, yeah, perhaps I'm going to do that in the future, I want to do something in the middle. It has to be like a binary choice. The same as if you say, okay, now I want to be entrepreneurial, go for it, right? Don't think I do that and I do that because that doesn't work. So I think what is good for people, I think very much depends on a people's personal position, right?
Okay.
So I think only a very small percentage of students should do a PhD, right? There is no need, I think from an economic point of view, it would not make a sense that if you look at, as RWTH has many computer science students, if they would all start doing a PhD, I think that would not be a very good idea.
Yeah, I feel like we need more going to the entrepreneurial route, which is why I'm pushing for that. Yeah. I don't know if you agree, but I'm trying to push people more in that direction.
So I think that as I said, there are different choices. I think it would be good to have more young people that are entrepreneurial and then let's say go for it 100%. But you should realize that like you have this, you do your master or your PhDs at a point in time when it is logical, or you don't do it. The same is a bit if you look at, let's say, your skill set, you should start with technical skills, right? So there is no way that you first learn entrepreneurial skills and then after you've learned entrepreneurial or social or management skills, it doesn't start with first you learn soft skills and then you go to, let's say, technical stuff. It doesn't work. Right, so what works is that you first start with technical things, and then there is this natural drift to become more applied, to become more, let's say, more focused on management, etc., etc. Right? So that's why, if you have the opportunity to learn technical things at a young age, do it, because even if you don't apply it directly, implicitly you're applying it. Right, it's the same with. Many people think that they have learned things in their mathematics high school classes that they don't use. And perhaps they don't actually use the things, but they have learned to think about things in an abstract way that is very helpful.
Yes, I agree, that's very, very important.
It's fine.
I'm so interested in discussing more with you, but we don't have much time, that's why I'm moving on quickly with the question. Would you like to try the dates? So these are less sweet, the other ones are, they have coffee beans or pistachios inside of them.
Very nice. It's with the coffee.
Yeah, there are other ones. I'll keep these here for you for the group to try. Okay, so before, I want to do a quick fire round of questions where I give you some short questions and you give me your immediate thoughts so we get through the questions quickly. But before we do that, is there anything you'd like to tell the world? I don't know how many viewers we're going to get. Is there anything you'd like people to know more about?
As I said, try to do something original in your life.
Okay.
Right? Don't follow the crowd. Try to do something original. I think that would be my best advice I can give.
Great message, great message. People, you know, you're saying this maybe from a research perspective, but I know like the entrepreneurial perspective, people say the exact same thing. Think independently, and do something original. Okay, now on to the quick questions. It's just for fun. Tell me, I'll tell you the questions and just give me your immediate thoughts so we can get through these questions quickly. So, would you prefer living in Germany or Netherlands? Or is that too hard of a question?
Germany.
Germany, okay. What's the ideal age to marry, or how to find out that you're ready to marry?
No advice.
No advice?
Okay.
Ideal age to have children? Also no.
Sorry?
Ideal age to have children, or when's the right point to have children?
I think there's always a trade-off, right? You want to build up your career at the beginning, and then at the end you should not be too old. So we have 4 children with like a 3-year spread within it, so we kind of have the whole spectrum.
I'm facing that problem right now of marriage and anyways, what's your favorite paper that you've written or that you've co-authored? You have so many now, but if you remember.
I think the alpha algorithm paper, the initial alpha algorithm paper, I think is still a paper that I kind of enjoy most. There are more sophisticated papers that like were after that, but I think that is the paper that I still like best.
I didn't read many papers, but I remember like the 10 rules. It feels so elegant. I don't remember if the other algorithms were just as elegant, but I remember it being very elegant with the 10 rules. Yeah. Okay, your favorite process discovery algorithm.
I think at this point in time it's still the inductive miner.
Still the inductive miner?
Yeah.
Okay. Favorite co-scientist you collaborated with?
Arthur ter Hofstede.
Who's that?
He's a professor at the university in Brisbane.
So Queensland?
In Queensland. So I've been collaborating with him since the late 90s. And so he's also a judge, but moved to Australia. And I think he is somebody that, I don't know, takes a lot of time to discuss about things.
Okay, we'll send this to him. Yeah. Most surprising or exotic process mining use case so far?
For example, analyzing wind turbine data.
Okay, we'll read more about that. Is AI, or especially LLMs, overhyped right now?
I think they are very important. At the same time, what I don't like is that people are treating it like a black box. And I think people are misguided when you look at textual language, that they think it's very smart, but it is actually not so smart. And I think with some people it starts to sink in that it is not so smart. That we are just as humans very sensitive to the form in which something is presented.
Okay. I've asked you this question a second ago, but I'll ask it again. Is pink your favorite shirt color?
No.
Okay.
I would say blue is my favorite color.
Okay, good to know.
Blue or black. Yeah.
Okay. Does money make you happy? If yes, how much? Not you personally, like maybe in general even.
I think it's always easy to say that you don't care about money, but it's comfortable if you have it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, what color should your Porsche 911 GTS be if some former student or some nice Celonis co-founder or some nice Signavio co-founder decided to gift you one?
I'm still waiting for it, but it should be black.
Should be black, okay. Okay, now the most important question of all of this interview. Who's your favorite former student whose name starts with T, first name starts with T, last name starts with J, and who did his bachelor thesis named ProReco, a process discovery recommender system?
I think you're referring to yourself.
Exactly.
So I can say a few things about. I was really surprised by your bachelor presentation.
Yeah.
Right? That was, so for the people that were there, they realized it was something very special, right? You were almost like an entertainer talking about your research. And that's something that I appreciated a lot.
Thank you very much. Professor, thank you very much.